In this video, I'm going to show you what's called turkey work, but honestly, I call it the fringe stitch because you can either do loops or fringe, but either way, if you cut the loops, you get fringe. But what you start out with, I'm using 6 strands, no knot, come down, leave a tail, come up just next to that little tail that you left, come back across and give it a little tiny stitch. That is the locking stitch. So that's how you start. So from now on, we're going to work across, making loops, and put a little locking stitch in each loop. So come up right next to that tail, bring your thread up, go down right next to the end of that locking stitch you made, come down, leave a loop, hold on to that loop, go back to the bottom of that stitch, and go across that, a little locking stitch, and there's your first loop. Now, a lot of tutorials will tell you to come up right there at the base of that first one. I like mine a little bit fuller, more full, so I come back to the left in between, right in the center of that loop. So I'm going to come up there, come down to the right of the previous locking stitch, leave a loop, come back down and put a little small stitch at the bottom of that loop to hold it in place. And there's your second loop. Come back to the center of this loop, which will be right there. Come up, go down just to the right of the previous stitch, leave a loop, and then do your locking stitch at the bottom of that loop. And there's the third loop. Now, if you are making flowers or something that you want to keep it as a loop, you're going to want to pay attention to how tall each of these loops are when you leave them. You want them to be equal across the top right here. If you're going to cut them, it doesn't really matter if they're different heights, because you're going to clip the loops and then trim them off. So just make sure that you make the loop long enough to give you some extra height so that when you trim it straight or curved or however you want to do it, you've got enough thread there. I need to do a locking stitch here. Down across that. And the smaller these stitches are, the fuller your loops or your fringe will be. So I'm going to work across to the end of this line, put my locking stitch in, holding that loop in place. That was a little crooked, but it won't show. Come back in the middle of that loop, come across, and put in my locking stitch. Now, if for some reason you should pull your loop too much, before you lock it down, just stick a needle in it and pull that loop back up until it's as long as you want it to be. I'm going to do one more loop. You can see it helps to use your finger to keep those threads out of the way so you can see what you're doing. Okay, so that would be the last one in that row. So if you want to come back and make a second row, come back across. You can very faintly see this line right here. And do the same thing and snug that next row right up against the first one you did. You can also work to put your stitches in between each little locking stitch, each loop in between the ones above. Since I've sort of overlapped these loops, that's not quite as crucial. But I'm going to start right here. Make a loop. Come down and do a locking stitch. And work my way across just as I did above. So I don't really need to finish that row. So once I get these finished, you can come back and I would have finished that row, but snip these, unless, like I said, you want to keep them as loops. You've got that. And then you can come back and trim them. This makes a mess, so I recommend doing it over a sheet of paper. And then trim them however you like. Just, like I said, the main thing is to leave yourself long enough loops so that you can have enough to trim off. And how it looks when it's finished. Oh, you can do this in rows, but you can also do it in circles. And that's what I've done here. You can see that underneath I drew a circle sort of as a guide, and then I did 3 rows. Lay down. I did 3 rows of 6 strands, and I actually mixed the colors. And if I turn it over, you can see there, you can see the 3, they're very close together, 1, 2, 3. And then I trimmed them, snipped the loops, trimmed them carefully, straightened out the fibers, and then trimmed them, and there you go. That is the fringe stitch.